your ARIA name and role are perfect, your UI can still fail users without you even realizing it. And in this video, I'm going to show you the exact layer most teams completely miss. And I'll also walk you through the exact steps to verify value correctly. So watch this video till the end. In our last video, we exposed role, how giving role button to a dev does not make it behave like a button. And today, we are exposing value because assistive technologies don't just need to know what something is. They need to know what's happening right now. And that's where ARIA value comes in. Most accessibility bugs are not caused by wrong roles. They are caused by something worse, missing value or misleading value. Let me show you something you might not realize. According to the latest WebAIM analysis, there are over 133 million ARIA attributes across home pages. That's more than 130 ARIA attributes per page on an average. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. Pages that use ARIA have significantly more accessibility errors than pages that don't. Now, this doesn't mean ARIA is bad. It means most teams don't understand it. They add ARIA without exposing the right value. And that's exactly what breaks the experience. ARIA is based on three core pillars. Name, that tell users what an element is called. Role, that tell users what it is, whether it's a button or a link. But value, it tells users the current state, whether a button is in the expanded or the collapsed state, or a checkbox is checked or unchecked. The difference between someone who knows accessibility and someone who actually builds usable products is understanding this layer. Let's take an example. If we use a native button to toggle visibility, the screen reader will announce this button as shipping details button. That's fine, but it's still incomplete. As a tester, this is your responsibility. Ask yourself, should it be expanded or collapsed? Because right now, the user has no idea whether the content is visible or hidden. This is where ARIA becomes necessary. When a button controls visibility, you must expose its state using ARIA expanded. Now watch the difference. Without ARIA expanded attribute, it's announced as shipping details button. With it, it's announced as shipping details button collapsed or expanded based upon the value you have set. That is usable. That is value. And if you have ever tested something that looked fine, worked with a keyboard, but still felt incomplete with a screen reader, this is exactly what was missing. This video is proudly sponsored by AccessifyLabs, a company redefining how truly inclusive digital experiences are built. AccessifyLabs is an end-to-end digital accessibility partner, helping organizations ensure their websites, applications, and digital platforms are accessible to everyone, regardless of ability. From expert audits and compliance to training, remediation, and continuous monitoring, they support the entire accessibility lifecycle. If you believe digital accessibility should be a standard and not an afterthought, explore AccessifyLabs through the links in the description below. Now, let's simplify value. Value is the current state, the current setting, or the current change that assistive technology needs to understand and then communicate it to a screen reader user. If name is the label and role is the job, value is the status right now. And value is the difference between seeing an element and understanding it. Now, you might ask, Param, why value matters? It matters because without value, users are guessing. And when users guess, they make mistakes. They abandon flows, they lose trust. And for businesses, that's lost revenue. Imagine a checkbox with no state, an accordion with no expansion information, a button that says nothing about what changed. And here's the dangerous part. Users don't know if the interface is broken or if they did something wrong. And before we dive deeper, A huge thanks to our members for supporting this channel. You are helping making this series deep and not surface level. And if you are getting real value from our accessibility videos, consider joining. You are funding real demos, real audits, and real production failures. Let me give you a simple mental model. Value can be grouped into few key buckets. And once you understand these, you stop guessing. Let's start with the most common type, widget value. This answers questions like, is it checked, is it expanded, or is it selected? These are critical for a screen reader user. Comment widget to get a complete list of the most commonly used widget values. If your components don't expose this, you're not just missing accessibility, you are shipping incomplete UI. Another important bucket is global values. These don't define what a component is. They define how it behaves in relationship to other elements. For example, ARIA hidden, it hides content from assistive technologies. ARIA controls defines a relationship among two different elements. ARIA owns redefines the structure. It tells assistive technology this element owns content even if it's not in the DOM hierarchy. And this is exactly where things get tricky. Because visually, everything may look connected. But programmatically, the relationships can be broken. For a sighted user, layout defines relationships. But for a screen reader user, ARIA defines relationships. And this is happening at scale. Pages today average over 20 instances of ARIA hidden. When used correctly, it's powerful. When used incorrectly, you're hiding content from users who rely on it. For example, a button that opens up a panel, visually it's crystal clear, but without ARIA controls, there is no connection. Without proper structure, assistive technology has to guess. And if you have ever been confused between ARIA owns and ARIA controls, you're not alone. Comment ARIA owns versus ARIA controls, and I will do a deep dive breaking down the differences with real examples. Next, we have live regions, and this is where most real-world applications completely break. Not all value comes from interaction. Some value comes from dynamic changes happening in your application. For example, when an item is added to cart, or when there is an error message complaining about the email address. Visually, they are clear, but for a screen reader user, these changes don't even exist unless you expose them using ARIA Live. Simply adding ARIA Live polite to a div will make it announce these dynamic changes without moving your focus. Live regions act like a narrator for what just changed on the screen. If you don't define this properly, important updates either never get announced or worse, they interrupt users at the wrong time. If you're working on a real production app, this is not optional. And most of the time, this is the difference between a usable experience and a frustrating one. Next one is drag and drop. And this is a trap a lot of developers fall into. You might have seen ARIA grab and ARIA drop effect attributes. But in reality, these are deprecated and effectively obsolete. They were part of the older model that never worked consistently. So don't use them in modern applications. Instead, build drag and drop that works with keyboard and communicates changes clearly to assistive technologies. Now, if you are someone who takes pride in building clean systems, this next part is going to hit hard. Wrong value is worse than missing value. For example, if a screen reader says collapsed, but visually that section is open, or a checkbox that says checked, but it's not, or a spinner that says loading, but never updates. That's not an accessibility issue, that's misinformation. And now is the time to enable you to test for values. Simply look at the UI and ask, what should the user know right now? Then check is that being announced correctly. You can inspect the element in DevTools and look for ARIA value attributes. Start interacting with the UI and verify, does it update the value attribute? This is the mindset shift from someone who runs tools to someone who understands accessibility. Name, role, and value. This is not a theory. This is how assistive technologies understand your UI. Name tells user what it is called. Role tells users what something is. But value tells users whether they can trust it. Most teams stop at name and role. That's why their interfaces look accessible but don't feel usable. If you are serious about building products that actually work for real users and not just pass audits, then this is the layer you cannot ignore. This is Param Singh, signing off.